What if the two strangers you helped today were secretly royalty? What if your one small act of kindness, something you did for free, expecting nothing back, changed your entire life forever? Most people walk past strangers every single day. They mind their own business. They keep moving. But one ordinary man chose differently. He stopped. He helped. He asked for nothing. And what happened next shocked an entire world. This is not just a story about kindness. This is a story about a man who had no idea he was being watched. No idea who those children really were. No idea that one quiet afternoon in his workshop would flip his entire world upside down. 3 things in this story will genuinely shock you. First, who those children actually were. Second, what their family did when they found out. Third, the truth about why they were there in the first place. Nobody saw this coming. Not even him. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The workshop smelled like oil and metal and old wood. It always did. That was the smell Marcus Webb had grown up with. His father had worked with his hands. His grandfather, too. And now Marcus, 34 years old, ran his own small repair shop on the edge of a quiet town in northern England. The kind of town where everybody knew everybody, where strangers stood out, where nothing surprising ever really happened. At least, that was what Marcus used to think. The shop was not fancy. The walls were lined with pegboards covered in wrenches, screwdrivers, pliers, and tools of every shape and size. A single bright lamp hung low over his main workbench. Outside the windows, the sky was turning gray. Rain was coming. Marcus could always tell. The air had that cold, heavy feeling that only comes before a real storm. He was alone that afternoon. His one part-time helper had gone home early. The shop was quiet except for the sound of his hands working and the low hum of the overhead lights. That was when he heard the knock. It was soft at first, almost too soft to hear. Marcus looked up from the engine part he was cleaning and frowned. He was not expecting anyone. He walked to the front door and pulled it open. 2 children stood outside. They were small, young, maybe 8 or 9 years old. A boy and a girl. Both of them had the same unusual look about them, pale silvery skin, large calm eyes that caught the light in a strange way, and hair that seemed almost too perfect, too neat, for 2 kids standing in the wind outside a repair shop. They were dressed simply, plain gray clothes, no logos, no brand names, nothing that told you anything about who they were or where they came from. The girl was holding something in both hands. It was a toy, or at least, it used to be. Now it was broken into 3 pieces. It looked like some kind of small flying vehicle, like a miniature spacecraft almost, with swept-back wings and a rounded body. It had tiny lights along its edges that were dark and dead. Whatever it was, it clearly meant something to her. She was holding the broken pieces carefully, like they were precious. She looked up at Marcus with those big, quiet eyes. She did not say a word. The boy spoke instead. His voice was calm and clear and very polite, almost too polite for a child his age. He said they had been walking and the toy had fallen and broken, and they had seen the repair shop sign and wondered if perhaps the man inside could fix it. Marcus looked at the broken toy in the girl's hands. He had never seen anything quite like it before. The materials were strange. Not plastic. Not metal exactly. Something in between. Something he could not immediately name. The way the pieces fit together was unusual too. Like nothing he had built or repaired in 34 years of working with his hands. But the girl's eyes stopped him from overthinking it. She was just a kid with a broken toy she clearly loved. Marcus stepped back and held the door open wider. He told them to come in out of the cold. He did not ask them where they were from. He did not ask where their parents were. He did not make a big deal out of the fact that two children had shown up alone at his door on a gray Thursday afternoon. He just led them to the workbench, pulled up two old stools for them to sit on, and carefully took the broken toy from the girl's hands. He examined it under the bright lamp. The more he looked, the more curious he became. The internal components were unlike anything he had ever seen. Tiny crystalline structures that pulsed faintly even without power. Connections that seemed to be made of a material that responded to warmth. Microengineering so precise it almost did not seem real. Marcus looked at the two children. They looked back at him with those calm, patient eyes. He picked up his smallest tool. He got to work. Marcus worked slowly. He always worked slowly when something was new to him. That was his rule. When you do not understand something fully, you slow down. You pay attention. You do not rush. The toy was unlike anything he had ever touched. He had repaired electronics, engines, circuit boards, old radios and antique clocks, and once, memorably, a robotic arm that a university student had brought in after an experiment gone wrong. Marcus had seen a lot of unusual things in his shop over the years. But this was different. The internal structure of the toy seemed to operate on principles he could not quite explain. The crystalline components were not wired together in any traditional sense. They seemed to communicate with each other through some kind of contact system that Marcus had never seen in any manual or textbook. And yet somehow, looking at it carefully, it made a kind of sense. A different kind of sense. Like a language he had never learned but could almost understand. He glanced up at the two children. They were sitting very still on their stools. Most children fidgeted. Most children got bored and started looking around the shop, picking things up, asking questions. These two did not. They sat with their hands folded and watched him work with an expression of quiet, total calm. It made Marcus a little uneasy, in a way he could not explain. He looked back at the toy. He asked them, without looking up, what the toy was supposed to do. The boy answered. He said it was a model of a long-range scout vessel. A very old design. A family heirloom. He said it had been in their family for a very long time, and that his sister had been given it as a gift for her last naming day. Marcus did not know what a naming day was. He assumed it was a birthday. He asked where they were from. There was a brief pause before the boy answered. He said they were from very far away. He said it with a small smile. Not a nervous smile. A knowing one. Like the answer was both completely honest and somehow not the full picture at the same time. Marcus let it go. He kept working. After about 20 minutes, he found the primary fracture point. One of the central crystalline nodes had cracked clean through on impact. The other two pieces of the toy had separated from it because of that single break. If he could stabilize the node, the rest of the structure would likely hold. He did not have the exact right materials. He never would. But he had something close. A two-part bonding compound he used for high-stress micro-repairs. He had used it on circuit components before. He had used it on glass. He had even used it once on a ceramic engine casing that everyone else said could not be fixed. He used it now. Carefully. Precisely. His hands were steady. They always were. The girl watched without blinking. It took him another 40 minutes of careful, patient work to get the pieces fully realigned and bonded. When he finally set the toy down under the lamp and stepped back, it looked whole again. The seams where it had broken were barely visible. And then, as he and the two children watched in silence, the tiny lights along the edges of the toy began to glow. First one, then two, then all of them at once. A soft blue light filled that corner of the workshop. The girl made a sound, small and quiet, but unmistakably happy. She reached out and picked up the toy with both hands and held it close and looked at it with an expression that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. Pure joy. The kind of joy that is completely real and completely unguarded and cannot be faked. He felt something warm in his chest. He told them it was fixed. He told them there was no charge. The boy looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. Once, slowly, like he was filing that information away somewhere important. Marcus did not think much of it at the time. He really should have. 3 days passed. Marcus went back to his normal life. He opened the shop. He drank his morning coffee standing by the window. He repaired engines and circuit boards and a very old pocket watch that belonged to a woman who had carried it since her wedding day 40 years ago. Normal days. Quiet days. He thought about the 2 children a few times. Wondered where they had gone after they left his shop. Wondered who their parents were. Wondered about that toy and those strange crystalline components that he still could not fully explain. But life moved on. It always does. Then on the morning of the 4th day, a car pulled up outside his shop. Not a normal car. It was long, black, completely silent. No engine sound at all. The windows were dark. The vehicle seemed to absorb the morning light rather than reflect it. Marcus watched from behind his workbench as it parked directly in front of his door with a precision that felt deliberate and unhurried. 2 figures stepped out first. Tall, dressed in dark uniforms Marcus had never seen before. Not police. Not military. Something else entirely. They stood on either side of the car door and waited. Then a 3rd figure stepped out. She was tall and striking, and moved with the kind of complete, quiet confidence that Marcus had only ever seen in people who were used to being the most important person in any room. She wore simple but clearly expensive clothing. Silver gray. Her eyes were the same unusual calm color as the 2 children's. Her hair was dark with threads of silver running through it. She looked like someone who had seen a great deal of the universe and found most of it manageable. She looked directly at Marcus through the shop window. She walked to the door and knocked. Marcus opened it. She introduced herself in a voice that was measured and precise, and carried just the faintest trace of an accent he could not place. She told him her name. She told him she was the mother of the 2 children who had visited his shop 3 days ago. She told him she had come in person because this was not conversation she was willing to have any other way. Marcus stepped aside and let her in. She sat down across from him at the workbench. Her 2 escorts remained outside. She placed her hands flat on the old wooden surface and looked at him with those calm, steady eyes and told him the truth. Her children were not from England. They were not from Earth. She paused to let that settle. Marcus stared at her. She continued. She told him that her family had been traveling through this region of space on a diplomatic transit, and that her children had slipped away from their secured transport during a brief stopover. This happened sometimes with curious children, she said, with the practiced tone of a parent who had dealt with this particular problem before. They had been located within the hour and returned safely. But during that time, they had found their way to his shop, and he had helped them. She reached into a small case she was carrying. She placed something on the workbench between them. It was a document, printed on a material that was not quite paper, dense with writing in a script Marcus could not read. But at the bottom, unmistakably, was a symbol, a seal, circular and intricate and clearly very old. She told him that her family held a position of authority that was difficult to translate into human terms. But the closest equivalent, she said, was royalty. Her children were heirs. They had rank and standing across multiple systems. Marcus looked at the document. He looked at her. He asked the only question he could think of in that moment. He asked if the toy was still working. She looked at him for one silent second. And then, for the first time, she smiled. She told him it was working perfectly. Marcus did not sleep well that night. He lay on his back in the dark and stared at the ceiling and went over the conversation again and again. The woman's face, the silent black car, the document with that ancient seal. The way she had said the word royalty like it was a simple factual statement, and not the most extraordinary thing anyone had ever said inside a small repair shop in northern England. Multiple systems. She had said multiple systems. Not multiple countries. Not multiple regions. Multiple systems. He had not asked her to explain that. He wished now that he had. By morning he had convinced himself, partially, that he had misunderstood something, that there was a more ordinary explanation he had missed. People said strange things sometimes. People had unusual backgrounds, unusual ways of describing themselves. Maybe it was a cultural thing. Maybe something had been lost in translation between whatever her first language was and English. He opened the shop. He made his coffee. He stood by the window. The black car was parked outside again. Marcus set down his coffee. This time when he opened the door, it was the boy standing there. The same neat gray clothes. The same perfectly calm expression. The same large, quiet eyes. He was holding something in both hands again. Not a broken toy this time. A small box. He held it out toward Marcus with both hands in a gesture that somehow felt formal. Like an official presentation. He told Marcus that his mother had sent him. He told Marcus that in their culture, when someone performs an act of genuine kindness without expectation of reward, it creates a bond of honor. He used that phrase exactly. Bond of honors. And he said that their family did not allow such bonds to go unacknowledged. Marcus took the box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single item. Small, disc-shaped, made of the same strange, non metal material as the toy had been. Its surface was covered in microfine engravings that caught the light and shifted color depending on the angle. Deep blue, then gold, then a color Marcus genuinely had no name for. The boy told him it was a token of formal recognition. He explained that in his family's tradition, these tokens carried weight. Real weight. If Marcus ever found himself in a situation of genuine need, and he presented this token to any member of their extended network, and the boy said that network was very large, he would receive assistance. No questions, no conditions, full and immediate help. Marcus looked at the small disc in his palm. He looked at the boy. He asked the boy why. Why him? Why not just leave? They had found the children. They were safe. Nobody had asked him to fix that toy. It was a small thing. A nothing thing in the larger scale of whatever their lives looked like. The boy was quiet for a moment. Then he said something Marcus wrote down later that evening so he would not forget it. He said that his people had traveled a very long way and had seen a very great many things. He said that genuine kindness without expectation was rarer than any material or resource his family had ever encountered in all of that travel. He said Marcus had not helped them because of who they were. He had helped them because of who he was. That was the thing worth honoring. Marcus stood there in the doorway of his small workshop in northern England, holding a disc that shifted between blue and gold and a color with no human name, and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt seen. The boy gave a small, polite nod. He turned and walked back toward the silent black car. Marcus watched him go. He looked down at the disc in his hand one more time. Then he went back inside. He had work to do. But something was different now. Something had shifted quietly and permanently inside the ordinary shape of his days. He just did not yet know how different things were truly about to become. 6 months later, Marcus received a letter. Not an email, not a message. An actual physical letter delivered by hand to the front door of his shop, by a man Marcus had never seen before who arrived, left the envelope on the doorstep, and was gone before Marcus even reached the door. The letter was written in English. Perfect English. But the paper was that same not-quite paper material. And at the top of the page was the seal. The same circular, ancient, intricate seal from the document the woman had placed on his workbench 6 months before. The letter was from her. She explained that her family had completed their diplomatic transit and returned to their home system. She said the children were well. She said her daughter still kept the repaired toy on a shelf in her personal quarters and showed it to anyone who visited. She said the toy had become something of a story in their household. A lesson. Then she told him what she was offering. Her family had decided to establish permanent observation and exchange post in this region of space. Something small and quiet and non-intrusive. A listening point. A place of quiet study. In selecting a location and a liaison, a human contact who would serve as a point of trusted connection, her family had discussed many options. They had chosen Marcus. Not because of his skills, though those were noted and respected. Not because of his location, though it was considered suitable. They had chosen him because of one afternoon. Because of a broken toy and a lamp, and a pair of steady hands and a man who had looked at 2 strange children on his doorstep and seen nothing but 2 kids who needed help. The letter asked if he was willing. Marcus sat down. He read the letter 3 times. He looked around his shop. The pegboard walls. The tools he had used his whole life. The old workbench his father had built. The lamp his grandfather had hung. The smell of oil and metal and old wood that had been the smell of his entire world for 34 years. He thought about what the boy had said. He had not helped them because of who they were. He had helped them because of who he was. He picked up a pen. He wrote 1 word on a piece of plain paper. Yes. He folded it. He placed it inside a plain envelope. He walked to his front door and he held it out into the open air. The man he had never seen before was standing there, waiting, as if he had never left. The man took the envelope, nodded once, and walked away down the road until Marcus lost sight of him completely. Marcus stood in the doorway of his shop for a long time after that. The sky above him was very wide and very deep and full of stars that he now knew held things he had never imagined. Systems, families, civilizations old enough to have heirlooms that crossed the darkness between worlds. A girl who kept a repaired toy on a shelf and told its story to visitors. A bond of honor. He had spent 34 years with his head down, working, repairing, fixing things that were broken, and sending them back out into the world without ceremony or expectation. He had never thought of that as remarkable. It was simply what he did. Who he was. Turns out, someone had been paying attention. Turns out, the universe notices more than we think. Marcus walked back inside. He turned on the lamp. He picked up his tools. And somewhere above that gray and ordinary English sky, in a region of space too vast to name, a small repaired toy glowed softly blue on a shelf in a royal Heirs room. Still working. Still perfect. Just like kindness always is when it is real. Here is the part nobody expected. After Marcus accepted the offer, the first thing the family sent him was not equipment, not instructions, not a map of systems or a guide to diplomatic protocols. They sent him a tool, a single instrument, crafted in the same material as the toy, engraved with the family seal, sized perfectly for a human hand, because they had watched him work. And what they valued most in their liaison was not his willingness or his location or even his kindness. It was his hands, his patience, his ability to take something broken and make it whole. That was the skill they needed most. In all their travels, across all those systems, that one human ability, to sit quietly with something damaged and not give up on it, was rarer than they had words for. If this opened your eyes to how powerful ordinary kindness really is, the next story will take it even further. So let us bring this home. Marcus Webb was not special in any traditional sense. He was not famous. He was not wealthy. He was not powerful. He was a man with a lamp and a workbench and steady hands, and a willingness to help two strangers for free. And that one choice, that single ordinary act, opened a door that changed everything. 3 things to remember from this story. Kindness is never wasted. You never know who is watching. And the things that feel most ordinary about you might be the most extraordinary to someone else. If this story moved you in any way, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who need to hear stories like this one. Subscribe if you are new here. Every single week we bring you HFYSCIFI stories that remind you why being human is something worth celebrating across the entire universe. And here is the question for today. If 2 strangers knocked on your door with something broken, would you help them? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. Next video is already waiting for you. You are going to want to see it.